Welcome to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Director and Assistant Director of Menlo College's Office of Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad, Dylan Houle and Kelly Davis, in partnership with Menlo's Content Creation Club. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leverage Your Potential. I am your host today. My name is Kelly Davis. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services and Study Abroad at Menlo College, and I'm here today with one of our students, Klay Ketelle. Klay, it is wonderful to have you here today.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Yay, perfect. He nailed the intro. So, Klay, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, why you chose Menlo, and what you're majoring in, and tell us when you expect to graduate.
Sure. So I'm originally from Northern California, not too far away from Menlo itself, and currently studying business marketing, and I plan to graduate in the fall-winter session of this year. So coming up soon, which is great. I was interested in Menlo for a few reasons. I took I was involved with a sort of academic career college planning program in high school, and they did a lot of personality tests and character trait sort of examinations to determine what type of schools fit best for me and my learning style. And the first one that came up was Menlo. And I had heard the name before on my campus through sort of the recruitment processes and such. And so I was definitely interested, and I got in contact with Ken Bowman in admissions and got to take a tour, I want to say in October of 2016, before I was set to graduate high school, and fell in love with the campus and how quaint it was, and it was in a beautiful area. And I would say that's why. The teaching is fantastic. It's a close-knit community. Most professors put their personal text messages, their personal phone numbers on the syllabus, which is great if you have questions about finals and things like that. So it's been a great experience. Yeah.
I didn't know that about our Menlo professors. They're very, it seems almost, I don't know where else you would find that, where you would have professors giving out their personal phone numbers, but that's pretty cool. Direct line.
It is. I talk to my friends who go to UCs, and I'll even say, yeah, I emailed my dean the other day and blah blah blah, and they're like, what? You emailed your dean? Like you have his email, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very funny. So
I also come from a really large university, and it is, when I started working at Menlo, it was very odd and also really cool that I could have a conversation with the provost on a more or less regular casual basis. So it's
right.
Really unique to small schools, definitely. Well, Klay,
absolutely.
The main reason we have you on the podcast today is because you studied abroad. Let's see, it was last spring, so about a year ago now. You were wrapping up, and you studied abroad in Italy. So to start off, if you want to tell us a little bit pre-studying abroad, what led to that initial interest?
Sure. So for me, I grew up in a very small suburban community, and my parents were great, and we traveled as much as we could, but they got divorced when I was really young. And I think a lot of times when parents divorce, that dynamic of familial traveling and such sort of gets fallen by the wayside in some cases, which is totally fine. But as I was growing up, I sort of was looking on the internet, on social media, at these photos of Europe and Asia and the Middle East, and sort of just longing for the chance to go see it myself. And so I always wanted to, never had the chance. And then once I was in college, I had a roommate from Denmark, and we got to chatting about the differences between European culture and American culture and all the places he had been, and it just furthered me to be inspired by the chance of studying abroad. And so once that sophomore year came around, I was jumping on the opportunity. So.
Yeah, that's great. I also had a friend in high school who was from Norway. Sometimes this is conversations with those closer people that makes us so interested and make us curious to be there and actually see it for ourselves. I'm curious, do you now prefer traveling alone?
Oh, absolutely. It is so much easier. I when when I was a kid, oh my goodness, traveling with family can be very hectic. To put it politely, I suppose.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so the first time I traveled alone, I was at first very nervous. I wanted to be on time and make sure I hit all the points, but once you hit that stride while you're traveling by yourself, it's fantastic. And I was able to just kind of eat wherever I wanted in an airport terminal, or if I needed to do something, I was free to do whatever I had to do. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
I prefer it.
I understand that. It's sometimes when you're traveling with another person, you have to compromise on some of what you want, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you have to go in there with that expectation, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
and understand that that's how you're going about that experience. But it can be really nice to go alone and actually get to experience things and process and reflect when it's just you and not someone who's next to you the whole time even, or something like that.
Oh yeah, and the experience is much more reflection based. I feel like you're not so worried about the well-being of others. You can sort of take that self-care moment to step back and reflect on how it's affecting you in that current situation.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
talking about that. I'm glad we got to touch on that for a minute. So you had a roommate from Denmark, but then you ended up going to kind of one of the other sides of Europe, which was in Italy. And I think that you've been to both places. They're very different in their own unique
Mm-hmm.
ways. What led to your interest in studying in Rome, Italy? What were some of the highlights that ended up being part of that semester abroad?
Sure. So I think my interest in Italy, I think like anyone's, was from just a sort of pop cultural idea of what Italy was, and I'm a big fan of old movies, and so watching the spaghetti westerns, if you will, from Francisco Morricone and all those types of directors and stuff, really inspired me throughout my creative endeavors. And so the first time I went abroad was to Denmark because I eventually started dating a girl from Menlo who was from Copenhagen, and her and I took a trip the summer before I began the study abroad process, to Rome, because that was my girlfriend Olivia, that was her favorite place to visit. So we went to Rome, and I was immediately, the breath was taken out of me from landing on the plane. I mean, it was just incredible. I remember one day we were walking through a piazza, and we kind of got lost on our way to this restaurant that we were trying to get to, and the way the architecture is, we quite literally stumbled into this middle of this plaza, and we're looking around, and it was the Pantheon.
All those cobblestones.
All those cobblestones, right? And I was speechless. And so we walked into the Pantheon with the hundreds of thousands of other people there, and it was just so surreal. And when I left Italy, I knew when I was going back to school that the next semester, I was like, I got to figure it out there. I got to figure out how to get there. So yeah. You also mentioned highlights from studying abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, what was cool about study abroad was the place, the program I did study abroad with, CEA. They match you. It's an American company, so there's a lot of engagement with other students from the U.S., which at first I wasn't the biggest fan of, and then once you're there with other people, at first it's such an alienating process because you're in this new territory and you quite literally don't know anyone and you don't know the language more or less, and so you're walking around the streets and you're trying to navigate just to get groceries. So having someone from the States that you could sort of come back to and chat and discuss about your unique experiences was nice. And then the other thing, I think my favorite memory from study abroad was I would go on runs all the time. And so I would just pick a destination on a map and just run there. And it was such a fun way to see the city and engage in the culture. And people would stare at me like, why is this kid running through the street in cobblestone?
Yeah.
Which is really funny. But yeah, I love my time there so much. It was great.
It's interesting that you talk about running, because I've gone running in a couple of different cities where you just wouldn't necessarily do that there in the center of
Right.
a city. So I remember I might have even done it in Athens once or something. It was early in the morning before it got hot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But was your housing located kind of more in the center? How was it sort of dodging people on the street as you tried to?
Oh, right.
Nation.
Right. Yeah. So there was, I think, I want to say 5 or 6 apartments that they had the students sort of living in, and CEA it's not a campus per se. It's more of a large office building that you go to every day. And CEA's office space, essentially, or their classrooms, if you will, were right next to the sort of the judicial building in Rome, or like the law building where the judicial process is taken out. And so we were right in the heart of the city, sort of west of the city center, if you will, sort of where all the historic landmarks are. And yeah, so our apartment was right next to Vatican City, as a matter of fact, which once we figured that out, my roommates and I were like, oh my gosh, we're right here. So that was really cool. And so yeah, so quite literally in that space, there's hustling, bustling streets, one of the main streets, and people are walking all over the place, and there's shops on every corner. And so you're dodging people as you're jogging through the city. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Well, so pivoting a little bit from, actually, one quick question. Was this one of the programs where CEA had you take classes with CEA and one of their partner schools, or was it just courses with CEA?
It was courses. Actually, there was an option for both. So it depended on the classes that you wanted to take. So for a lot of students, they were taking the semester to study abroad to focus on their humanities courses or lectures. And for some students who came from Catholic or religious schools, private institutions, they were also taking some art and or theology courses at John Cabot University, which is an American institution in Rome. It's in the district of Trastevere, which is like southeast of down the Trastevere River, or the river Tiber, something of that nature.
I'm gonna link. I'm gonna put a link to a map of Rome in our show notes so people can
yes.
follow.
Yes. Maybe I think it's southeast. I'm trying to remember the map in my head. But
sure, yeah. Did you yourself take any courses at John Cabot, or did you just take them through CEA?
I just took them through CEA, yeah, and it was something that you didn't necessarily choose. So it was just depending on the courses that you signed up for.
Right.
And then on orientation, they were like, how many of you are taking this, or this course? And then the students who raised their hand, they explained to them the process of getting to John Cabot and that whole thing. So. Yeah.
Got it. And what did you think of the courses that you took with CEA?
I really enjoyed the courses I took with CEA. Yeah. So the material besides one course, I would say would be the same sort of in any business school you would be going to. But what was great about the courses at CEA is the lens that the professors put on the perspective and with which you learned about the class. So a lot of the time we were discussing not just the US stock exchange, but the global economy and how Italy was doing in that very moment, as far as financials were concerned and trade was concerned and politics were concerned. So that was very refreshing for me, and it brought in a new perspective on shifting my mind less on just a US context, more on that global context, trying to figure out what that looked like for me. So yeah, that was great. And then I also got to take the course that was called A Brief History of the Italian Mafia, which was wonderful. And not only was it wonderful because I was an uber fan of The Godfather and Goodfellas and all those classic, mafiosi movies, but it was also a history course of 19th, 20th, and 21st century Italy, sort of all encapsulated, which was awesome to sort of get a chance to get into, because you learn history through Italy sort of in the ancient perspective, but we also don't get to hear that sort of modern perspective. So.
Yeah, that does sound really interesting. And that's exactly why I try to tell students who come to me as freshmen, save your electives so that they have the space to take any of those courses, because I know this wasn't through CEA, but one of our students who went to Italy and went with IFSA took a course in food, culinary, but sort of also tying that to the culture of Italy and different parts, different regions of Italy. So there's such cool courses that you can take, and they only fit into those gen eds or electives, and the flexibility is super necessary. But the Mafia course definitely seems like a popular one too. Was it kind of full, or were there just a few of you who were in that class?
It wasn't as full as I expected, I guess. But the people who were in it were just as curious as I was, I would say. So it was good. Like 15 some odd students who were all very intrigued with the material. So it was great.
Yeah, very vibrant discussions for sure.
Oh yes, it was good. It was a good time.
So did your experience in Italy, did that shift and did that impact your academic pursuits at all? And I'll also ask you the same of your career pursuits. So those are there's kind of three areas that I like to say, and many others in the field like to say, that study abroad can impact you. And it's the academic, your career related pursuits, and also kind of your personal development. So focusing on the academic and the career related, what was the impact, if there was any?
Sure. I think academically, that's interesting to me. I think if I was younger, I would have been more inclined academically to pursue some sort of minor or something or other in regards to art or a language, potentially, maybe not Italian, but maybe Italian or Spanish or something like that, to sort of further that learning process or that knowledge that I sort of picked up in Italy and left there, unfortunately, to continue pursuing the business major once I got back to the States. And then career-wise, I am very interested in trying to work overseas. And I don't think necessarily I mean, moving there full time and calling it a day, but I would love to have a job that provided me that capability or the necessity to travel and do business potentially with a partner in Europe or somewhere else. That seems very fascinating to me. So it definitely opened my eye to the possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like based on what you described, really taking away from those courses that you took, that that's a perspective that you really gained from that experience that you will apply one of these days. Maybe, who knows, maybe in a year or so when um, depending on what your next steps are after you graduate, which is exciting.
Yes.
So
Yes. Hopefully.
hopefully, yeah, we're kind of in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, so we're not really sure
Hmm.
when we're going to be able to travel again, but I have high hopes
Yeah.
that it'll be within the next couple of years at least, hopefully sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully sooner.
So on the personal front then, we talked about the academic and the career. How do you feel study abroad impacted you as a person?
It it impacted me as a person in so many ways. I could talk about it for hours, but I think what's most important was you. I I don't think we realize how much of a silo we live in a lot of the times. Even if you feel like you're somebody who is very very into the news media and is trying to gain different types of perspectives and understands world politics or world economics and is listening to um, Italian music or Spanish music and such. But what's so great about going overseas and getting a chance to live there and be there is you it makes the world much smaller because you realize, everyone, regardless of where they are just trying to live their lives like anybody else is, and I think that was a really sort of uh, heartwarming and reflective experience. I think I gleamed from my studies, just being able to engage with individuals and realize, like, we're all just we're all the same. I mean, Rome is marvelous, and there's these historical monuments that live in this beautiful city. But at the same time, uh, people are going to school and they're meeting at restaurants to hang out with friends, and they're complaining about traffic stops in the street. It's all the same, we're regardless of where you are. So that was great.
Yeah, it's kind of when you finally live in the place that you probably to some extent idealized in your mind one way or another, or romanticized, which
Sure.
we all do, and then you go and actually see that there's people who live on the ground making everything work, and
Yeah.
just as you say, kind of that we're all on these same levels no matter where exactly we're living, in the sense that we're trying to go day by day and survive and live our lives.
Exactly. Just be happy. Um, that was that's a great thing I learned or gleaned from studying in Italy specifically, is they they don't prioritize work as much as leisure. So in America, we have these concepts of dream jobs and all this different stuff, which is great, and it's important, for success. But at the same time, I don't feel like we take enough time for ourselves to sit back and, I mean, the Italian business protocol, you take an hour for lunch, an hour and a half if you want, it doesn't matter. They really value that. And so I think there's a happy medium to be found in between those two ideologies. But yeah.
Definitely. I certainly agree with that. One of the reasons why I think I was particularly interested in the politics and policies of Europe when I was an undergrad and getting my master's was because there were those differences where you could look to Sweden, and depending on the company, they all have, to some extent, fika hour, or where they all have coffee and come together and talk as colleagues for 15 minutes. And it's at 3 p.m. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's once a week, and there are companies, of course, that have that in the United States, but they are few and far between. So it's nice to be able to compare and go, okay, what's working over there that's not working, and what's not working here, and what can we trade in a sense. And I think that's the whole point of things like studying abroad and working abroad, is being able to actually exchange the best ideas that we have. So thanks for sharing what you gleamed in terms of that kind of personal reflection and processing. Do you still keep in touch with anyone who you met over there? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I do. Yeah. So I had 3 roommates. They were all very nice guys. And I every so often will talk to 2 of them, but I actually quite regularly talk to the gentleman I shared my actual room with. And that's great. He's from Wisconsin. He goes to University of Wisconsin up there. And we chat all the time, just about whatever, and then I also, there was a woman who worked in the CEA office, who at first she was doing the clerical work in the front desk operations, and now she got promoted after our semester. So we were like, yay! And she was so sweet and had such great information about Rome. And so at first your conversations with Cecilia were like just sort of about, where should I go to get gelato, or I'm trying to get to this subway station or this metro stop, and I always get stuck. Why am I, this or that? But then as the semester progressed, her and I just got to chatting more, and she became a very close friend. So I stay in touch with her quite a bit as well too. Especially checking up on her during this the pandemic and such, because it's a trying time for the Italians out there. So
yeah, definitely. I don't know if you find this, but I do find it a little bit easier to keep tabs on my friends internationally and further domestically as well. But it's kind of a nice time to be able to try to keep those touch points going.
Yes, absolutely. It's been really nice to reflect on that. And once I heard about how hard it was hitting Italy, I immediately reached out to Cecilia. I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Is your family all right? What's going on? So yeah, absolutely.
For sure. I'll be so grateful when this is all over, regardless. So you're going to be graduating this upcoming after the fall semester, as we've mentioned. How do you think that your experience studying abroad is going to help you, maybe, or how has it prepared you for this transition that's coming up into the workforce?
That's a good question. And I think one of the biggest ways study abroad has helped that transition is sort of on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. For one, as far as working environment is concerned, I've learned a lot about different cultural identities and how people in different regions of the world sort of work, and what that communication process looks like. So I think I'm starting to glean those ideas more into sort of how the communication process works in the US as well. And just people, all different types of people have communication that varies from one person to the next. So that's really helped a lot in prepping for interview processes and sort of learning about the company and their background or orientation. You sort of get a sense for how they work and what their dynamics are. So definitely in that end, it's helped a lot. And then also, it's also helped me not worry as much. I tend to be someone who stresses out a lot if I don't have my plans solidified. And again, with the sort of ease of the Italian way, would talk to people who worked at CEA and say, well, I mean, I'm 20 and I'm already, you know, I don't have a job solidified. I'm sort of stressed out. And they would look at me and go, you're a kid, you know, don't worry so much. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. You still have so much time to develop and figure out who you are, you know, so don't be upset if a company doesn't want you right away. You know, you got to just take that time and your opportunity will come. So that's been really helpful because that's something that I tend to not be the best with. So,
Sure. Yeah. I totally identify with that. I don't know if you've ever taken the official Myers-Briggs test, but so the ending letter, J or P, either judging or perceiving, and it has all to do with how you go about accomplishing tasks according to the deadline. And if you are more of a J, then you have more of a plan. You kind of you follow the timeline that you set out. It's more of a straight line. Whereas with the P, it can be it's often described as you're kind of all over the map. So you're like this little squiggly, and all of a sudden you hit the deadline. And I always was a J until I took it most recently, which was last semester, and all of a sudden it was a P. And I'd always been on the edge, but I thought it was interesting because I have over the years done more traveling experience, have accumulated more traveling experience, and it's gone from me studying abroad at various times and pursuing like a research project that had a specific goal during a specific time period to doing my own traveling and going from just booking the one ticket and kind of booking the rest all in advance and realizing once I got there that the next time I do that, I have to not book all the tickets in advance. But you really want to just so you know, kids, if you really want to do the true backpacking trip, you go and you figure it out as you go, and you don't do it in the middle of the summer because you won't be able to find a hostel, but you do it in the fall or in the spring, and you just kind of land in one part of France and talk to other people and figure out which little town you want to go to next. But it was just really interesting to kind of see that migration, that I was getting more comfortable with being more relaxed with my plans. Still definitely not perfect.
No, and it's really interesting that you say that, because I think that's exactly it. I went to study abroad thinking in one direction, and then when I came back, I'm not going to say it completely changed my perspective, because people get so stuck in their old ways. But I think for me now, when I'm doing something or making a plan, I have to stop and go, okay, you don't know there's too many what ifs in your scenario. You need to dial it back a little bit, you know, and let time predict what's going to happen. So
good for you. I think that's a great lesson to learn, and it's good to be able to mitigate ourselves between those two things, if to the extent that we can. So that's great. That's one of the things I think, especially right now, we don't know what the workforce world is going to look like when you graduate in December. Just as we're not totally sure what it's going to look like a month from now, but so I think that being able to have some sort of plan, but be able to kind of keep that flexibility within it, so that it's not that if one thing gets in the way of one part of the plan, the whole thing has to be restructured, is really important. You got to be, I guess, I was trying to think of the word that you're describing yourself as, and I think it is flexibility. I wasn't sure at first, but flexibility. I think that's
sounds
it.
Right. Sounds right. Sounds right to me.
So that's really great. That's a really good skill, I think, that is particularly typically, I guess, grown in a person or practiced in a person through some very specific scenarios, and study abroad is one of them. So it's awesome that you also experienced that. Now, thinking about other students, what advice do you have for any of those students who are interested but in studying abroad, but maybe they're a little bit nervous to take that first step?
Right. I think it's very important, if you're even the slightest bit interested in the program, to go to the informational sessions and just hear it out, and um, gain a better perspective on what the sort of the process looks like, and how it plays out. And I think a lot of kids are nervous that they're going to miss something at home, or potentially uh, not be able to connect with someone once they get there. Um, but to me, there's only a handful of individuals who get to say that they studied abroad and got to live and experience this new culture, and it's something that is so cherished for me, and has given me so much positive insights into my future. And so I think that's the best advice I could say, is like, just think about how great of an opportunity it really is, and once you get there, you're not going to regret it. And just go to those first meetings. Those first meetings really put a lot in perspective and ease the nerves and the uncertainty. So
Definitely. I think that when we give ourselves information and background, it makes us feel secure, like we know the answers in a way, to some extent. We
yeah,
feel the answers.
yeah, I agree. I think that that's a human thing, right? We want
Definitely.
to get some background on something before we make a decision. So yeah, that's what I would say. Do it. Go study abroad. It's the best thing I ever did. That's
Absolutely.
for sure.
And I remember there are a lot of students who I think who do get a little bit afraid of what they're missing out at home. The FOMO is real, but I like to tell students that before I went and spent a year abroad. I actually finally met the people who became my closest friends out of my college experience 2 months before I went away. And I thought, well, that's it. I found my people and now I'm leaving. But you know what?
Amazing.
Yeah. But when I came back, they were all still there, and that's really when
Yeah.
we all became such close friends. So it took nothing away to, at least that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's another timeline, but I don't know what that
Right.
is, and it only, like you, it's one of the best experiences that I think that I ever gave myself to date, if that, just as you were saying.
Yeah, and I think also my experience abroad really, I got to share it with my friends back home once I got back, and they were so interested in it, and I inspired one of my friends to go abroad, and he was studying in France. And so I think it's valuable, and if you consider it as something that's this great opportunity, which it truly is, you can be a force for for study abroad once you get back onto your campus, or within your friend groups. Yeah,
Definitely. I have a surprise question for you that I just thought of.
I'm
Um,
ready.
and it has a little bit to do with the COVID-19 situation, just because it's
Sure.
something that I've been thinking a lot about as a study abroad advisor. But what do you think is, now that we're in this situation where we have to stay home and we have to stay close to home right now, and we see students who in high schools, some of them are choosing to now go to colleges that might be closer to home. Well, in some ways, we're seeing us get a little bit more locked in. I'm hoping that is just temporary, seeing as I think that this having to be in one place is going to be temporary. But what do you think, especially reflecting on your experience, your international experiences? Do you think that coming out of this, will it be more or less important to be more globalized in some regard, to be more international, to have these experiences?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think it's um, I thought this before the pandemic sort of came into fruition, but I think the world within itself is becoming more globalized, and we've seen that with telecommunication pre-COVID, and now we're seeing it even more post-COVID. And while people might be more comfortable at the moment, um, sort of, you know, reaching back and sort of saying, okay, we shouldn't be investing in traveling to, overseas or whatever. I totally get that. It's a very uncertain time at the moment. However, once it's safe again, I think that it's going to be even more important to travel and see these different countries and realize the impact that it's had, not just on the U.S. but on everybody else. Because how are you supposed to understand the U.S. economy or the U.S. market of jobs if you don't understand the trading partners and how the coronavirus has affected their, global situation or economic situation? And in turn, it's this continuous learning process. So I think it's going to be even more important to do that, and even more so these countries that have been hit hard, like Italy. We as tourists, we love to go there and spend our money there, and so we have to be advocates and try to help our fellow countrymen get back on their feet. So
Sure, absolutely. I think that I love your answer there, and thank you for diving into that one. That's one that
sure.
I normally save for my colleagues in the international education world. So you did really well.
It was a good question.
It's a deep one. It's tough, but you excelled. And I totally agree. I think that coming out of this, it's going to be even more important in ways that we might not even be able to perceive yet, or that might be even more dire than, and I know that sounds crazy, but even more dire than just considering, supply chains and, but considering sort of cultural differences and how we perceive others. There's a lot of othering going on. But to digress.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yes.
That's a whole other pocket, right? There's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of dangerous space, and so we want to make sure that we're respecting other people's cultures and realizing that we're all human above this, right?
Yes, so we're all being impacted. The virus gets us and it impacts us one way or another, which is why, in some ways, kind of clamping down needs to be a global tactic, because it's to help everyone, but it only works if we're all on board in the appropriate manners. So fingers crossed, right. we see good decisions made, thanking our doctors and scientists out there who are doing great things. But thanks for touching on that one with me, Clay. I don't want to go too far down the COVID-19 path.
Yes.
But I think we've had a really great discussion here. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up with our last question, which is one that we ask everyone. Now, you are in the midst of finals, and we'll probably air this a little bit later, but letting everyone know that that's what's happening right now. So the question is, are you reading any books or listening to any podcasts, audiobooks, watching any good documentaries or TV shows that you want to share? Or maybe you're not doing it right now, but what are you looking forward to after Thursday when you've finished up that last final?
Yes, right. So I started reading Joan Didion's Slouching towards Bethlehem after while I was on spring break, and it's Joan Didion's. I mean, come on, I think she's one of the best to ever do it, if not the best to ever do it.
I haven't read any Joan Didion, so good to know.
She's a Sacramento legend. She's from Sacramento originally. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah, she's so good. And that book in particular is about California, sort of during the 60s and 70s, and a very weird and obscure transition that it was going through. And so I think it's really interesting to read after I've studied abroad, to see that perspective again on my hometown and sort of how it shaped
Sure.
the future. But that's a great book that I was reading, and then finals kind of got in the way, so I stopped. But I am very excited to pick that up again. And then a show that I also started that I've now put on pause until Thursday is Westworld. Never got into it before. Had heard the name, but just didn't really pay any attention to it. And I finished the first season, and I am super in. And I think it's great writing. It's a very compelling story. It's very meta, and there's like layers on top of layers. And it's one of those where after an episode you're like, what is anything anymore? So that's a good one.
That's cool. I've heard also about Westworld that it's got kind of those big deals with AI, right? So those big ethical questions and maybe philosophical questions as well.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And it's so pertinent to the future of technology and that business in general, because so many companies now are incorporating AI to some capacity. And so, I mean, the show is it's a fictional story, but it brings up a lot of the same questions that surface. So yeah, that's a great one. I highly recommend.
Right on. Well, thank you for those recommendations. And Klay, thank you so much for a great discussion. I'm really glad you could share your story about studying abroad, or at least a little piece of it, with our audience today. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate it. It was fun to reminisce and look back on study abroad, because it's been a full year now, which is crazy to think about and makes me miss it. So this is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand that. Just wait until it's more years behind you. You're looking at I don't know if you journaled, but I look at my journals and go, oh my gosh.
Right.
It seems like a lifetime away, but not. It's crazy. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
So that wraps it up, everyone. That's today's episode, and our podcast links can all be found on the Menlo College Career Services blog. That's blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. Episodes are posted weekly and can be found on our blog at blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Make it a great day.